Nicholas Hale, the billionaire everyone praised on magazine covers, never imagined the man who raised him, the man who once starved just so Nicholas could eat, would end up on a neighbor's porch, bowl in hand, begging for scraps. Isaiah Bennett, his father, the old black man who had carried Nicholas's future on his back, giving until there was nothing left. And now he stood trembling, his shoulders stooped, whispers darting around him like knives. Nicholas froze, memories tearing through. Nights Isaiah went without food, days he pawned everything just to keep his boy in school. That polished mask of success Nicholas wore for the world. It cracked. Money suddenly felt worthless if the man who built his life was left hungry. What Nicholas did next would change both of their lives forever. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us bring more powerful emotional stories like this one straight to you. Now, let's begin. The old man steadied himself against a peeling fence, each breath thin in the heavy afternoon heat. Isaiah Bennett's shirt, washed to a tired grey, clung to his frame as he shuffled across the dusty yard with an enamel bowl tucked carefully against his chest. His knuckles tapped gently against a neighbor's door, then folded back again, polite, almost apologetic. The smell of onions and oil spilled through the doorway. Isaiah kept his gaze low. "If there's anything left," he murmured, voice soft, a little shaky. "Just a spoon or two." A hinge creaked. Mrs. Dorsey, the neighbor, disappeared inside, then returned with a ladle of stew. She poured it slowly, careful not to spill. Isaiah's hands trembled as he clutched the bowl, nodding, mouth moving with gratitude, though no words came. Across the street, two men hunched behind a hedge, whispering. Not cruel, but not kind either. "Bennett again," one muttered. Ain't his boy rich? Like real rich, never around though, figures." Then tires crunched over gravel. A sleek black sedan slid onto the block, paint shining, windows dark as midnight. The engine hushed to a quiet purr. The door opened, and a man stepped out as though walking into another lifetime. Nicholas Hale, the face on Forbes, the voice from conference stages. His hand steadied on the car roof, a breath slipping from him like cold air. For a moment he didn't move, he just watched. Isaiah hadn't seen him yet. He was still thanking Mrs. Dorsey, shifting his weight, wincing, trying to stand straighter with his bowl of stew. The sun traced the lines of his face, carving them deeper. Nicholas stopped at the fence. His throat tightened. His father's shoes were split at the seam, his cuffs, neat but worn, pressed with care. Nicholas saw the care. He saw the trembling, and something inside him, something he had buried beneath work and wealth, went utterly. Still, the men behind the hedge noticed. "That car, that watch, that's him, no way." "Way." Mrs. Dorsey's eyes lifted, spotting Nicholas. Wary, curious. "You looking for someone, sir?" Nicholas wet his lips. No words came, only a nod. His eyes never left Isaiah. He took a step, then another, like walking through heavy water. His jaw loosened, his shoulders dropped, his fingers twitched open and closed, like trying to relearn something he'd forgotten. Finally, Isaiah turned. He blinked at the silhouette, the shine, the posture he'd know anywhere, even wrapped in a stranger's suit. For a moment, he looked caught, like a man without his hat. He shifted the bowl to his left hand, rubbed the right against his pants. Nervous. Habit, old as memory. Nicholas's gaze flicked to the enamel bowl, the stew cooling in the breeze. His head shook slightly. Regret, disbelief, heartbreak tangled together. His voice broke out, barely more than a whisper. "Dad." The word hung fragile in the air. Mrs. Dorsey cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Bennett, you take that inside now. Before it gets cold." Her words were a gift of dignity. Isaiah nodded, grateful, then glanced at Nicholas, almost smiling, because politeness was all he had left when he didn't know what else to do. From the hedge, a man muttered, voice tight. "Man, if that were my father." "Shh." "Let them be," the other answered. "Let the man stand first." Nicholas didn't rush. This wasn't about staging a scene or proving his wealth. His hand moved steady, fingers brushing the latch of the old gate. Click. The tired hinge gave way. Gravel shifted beneath polished shoes as he crossed the short distance. Each step like crossing years he could never get back. He didn't reach for the bowl. He didn't make promises. Not yet. Instead, he stopped just an arm's length away. Shoulders squared, eyes glimmering with something raw he couldn't blink away. The wind stirred, tugging at Isaiah's faded shirt, cooling the stew by a degree, carrying with it the faint salt of sweat, soap, and the dust of a long walk. Somewhere, a radio crackled through a soccer score. A dog barked twice, then coughed. Behind a fence, Nicholas gave a small nod, the kind that said, "I'm sorry," without words. Isaiah nodded back, a quiet understanding, like the rest could wait until the street stopped listening. And oh, the street was listening. Curious eyes behind curtains, whispers folded behind hands, everyone pretending not to watch while watching everything. The silence between father and son stretched, but instead of filling it, Nicholas simply followed. He didn't argue when Isaiah shuffled inside with that chipped enamel bowl clutched like it was gold. Nicholas walked behind him, each step echoing against floorboards worn thin by years of living. Inside smelled of starch and soap, clean but thin. The curtains were hand-stitched, their edges frayed, the kind you only replace when they've lost. Their battle with sunlight. Nicholas glanced around. The same cracked mug still sat on the table, the same fan turned slowly, squeaking every revolution, just as it had when he was a boy. He remembered. He had told himself he didn't, but he did. Isaiah set the bowl down with reverence, as though it were a feast. He bowed his head, whispered grace. Not for Nicholas, not even for the neighbors who'd given it, but for the simple chance to eat. Nicholas's throat tightened. Watching his father pray over scraps shattered something in him. Memories clawed their way back. He was small again, school shoes pinching his feet but brand new, a satchel full of books he never believed he'd own. And Isaiah, broad shoulders, bent over a sewing machine at midnight, glasses sliding down his nose, fingers calloused, steady, working by the light of a dim lamp. There had been nights Nicholas woke to the sound of coughing. He'd peek out to see Isaiah with a half-empty plate pushed aside, whispering to himself, "He needs it more than I do." Nicholas would go to school with a full belly while his father survived on water and bread. And then there was the day Isaiah sold his only cow, the cow that had kept them fed for years, just to pay Nicholas's exam fees. The neighbors whispered then too, "Why waste everything on a boy who isn't even your blood? He'll regret it." But Isaiah never answered back. He just tightened his belt another notch and worked harder. Now Nicholas sat at that same kitchen table. He let his palm drift across its scarred surface, knife marks, oil stains, each one a roadmap of their survival. Outside, two voices carried from the fence, neighbors who hadn't walked away fast enough. You know, Bennett could have had a better life if he hadn't wasted it on that boy. And look at that boy now, rich as a king but never home. He'll come around only when the cameras are rolling. That's how it goes. The words hit Nicholas like stones in his gut. His jaw flexed. He could almost stand, fling the door open, and shout them down. But what would it prove? They were right. He had been gone, always working, always saying next time after the deal closed. Years slipped away in those delays, and in that slipping, so had Isaiah's strength. The old man broke the silence, not with anger, but with a soft chuckle. "You remember that blue blazer you wanted for graduation?" Nicholas stirred the thin stew absent-mindedly, voice stuck in his throat. "Didn't fit in the shoulders," Isaiah went on, eyes twinkling. "But you stood taller than all those boys, thought you were flying." Nicholas closed his eyes. He remembered not just the blazer, but the hollowness beneath his father's proud smile, the hunger Isaiah had hidden that day. He hadn't asked then. He hadn't wanted to know. But now, watching him dip stale bread into watery broth, like it was treasure, Nicholas couldn't run from the truth anymore. The weight of it pressed down, heavy, merciless. The weight of sacrifice pressed down on Nicholas like an iron chain. His chest ached, not just from shame, but from the sharp clarity that no deal signed in a boardroom, no billion-dollar empire, could erase what sat across from him now. A man who had once starved so his son would never have to, and suddenly that truth began to burn. Nicholas sat hunched at the old table, elbows digging into wood scarred by decades, palms pressed together, eyes fixed on the floorboards as though they might open and swallow him whole. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavier than words, thick enough to hear his own pulse hammering in his ears. Isaiah lifted a spoonful of stew, blew across the steam, and sipped. His hand trembled, but his face, calm, steady. He caught Nicholas staring and answered with the same gentle smile he'd given years ago when Nicholas came home, scraped and bruised from the schoolyard. The smile that said, "It'll be fine, we'll find a way," but it wasn't fine, not anymore. Nicholas leaned back, dragging a hand down his face. He felt the sting in his eyes before the tears came, unbidden. His chest locked tight, and finally, his voice cracked free, ragged and low. "I left you," he whispered almost to himself. "I left you here hungry." Isaiah chuckled softly, waved it off, tapping the spoon against the chipped bowl. "Son, don't shame yourself. You were busy building. That's what I wanted for you." Nicholas's palms slammed flat against the table, not anger, but frustration boiling over. The sound echoed through the small house. Outside, the voices perked up, eager to twist the moment. "Did you hear that? That's him arguing with the old man now." "No, listen closer. That's not anger. That's guilt. That's a son finally realizing what he's missed." Nicholas's voice broke through the whispers, raw and unpolished. "You gave me everything, Dad. You went hungry so I could eat. You broke yourself so I could walk into rooms I didn't deserve. And where was I?" His shoulders shook, his mask of control shattering, "when all you needed was someone to sit with you." The billionaire's armor cracked wide open. The confidence, the polished speeches, the flawless posture, it all crumbled in front of the only man who had ever seen through it. Tears fell hard against the table, soaking into the wood that had once held their meager dinners. Isaiah reached across the table, fingers rough, nails short. His hand found Nicholas's and rested there, weak but steady, grounding. "Nicholas," he said, voice soft as worn cloth, "I didn't do it so you could cry for me. I did it because love doesn't ask for thanks. Love just gives." Nicholas bent forward until his forehead nearly touched his father's knuckles. His breathing was jagged, his chest heaving. He could smell the faint soap clinging to Isaiah's skin, mixed with the earthy scent of years of labor. That scent had once followed him to school, clinging to his clothes like a shield, and now he wanted it to stay forever. Outside, Mrs. Dorsey shushed the men by the hedge, though even she couldn't help whispering to a woman beside her, "Look at him, all the money in the world, and he's still just that boy in Mr. Bennett's shadow." And the woman answered softly, "Sometimes it takes a lifetime to see who really raised you." Nicholas straightened, swiping roughly at his face, though the tears kept coming anyway. He turned to Isaiah, his voice torn open, raw. "I don't care about the empire. The contracts, the headlines, none of it matters. Not if the man who made me ends up begging for scraps." Isaiah's eyes softened. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth lived already in every wrinkle across his face, every scar carved into his hands. Nicholas inhaled, shaky but determined. He pushed back from the table and rose to his feet. His voice rang louder now, loud enough for the fence, the street, maybe the whole town to hear. No more scraps, no more suffering. Dad! His throat caught, but he forced the words out. Fierce, unshakable. You're coming home with me, and I swear I will never let you stand on anyone's porch begging again. The murmurs outside fell into silence. Even the gossips couldn't find words. The sight of a billionaire crumbling before his father, it wasn't gossip anymore. It was something else entirely. It was something beyond pity, something too human, too sacred, to mock. Nicholas bent again and kissed his father's hand, awkward, trembling, desperate. He stayed there, forehead pressed against rough, work-worn skin, breathing as if he could pour every ounce of his wealth, his success, his power, back into the man who had once given him everything. And for the first time in years, Isaiah let his son carry the weight. Nicholas didn't waste another second. He stood tall in that dim kitchen, wiped the tears streaking his face and reached for his father. With firm yet gentle hands, he lifted him from the chair. The bowl of stew sat forgotten on the table, abandoned like a relic of suffering that no longer had a place between them. Isaiah tried to protest, but Nicholas steadied his arm. Not another word, he whispered. This isn't charity. This is family. The door swung open, spilling sunlight across the porch. Neighbors straightened where they stood, their whispers fading into silence as they watched a billionaire cradle a frail old man as though he were carrying the most precious treasure in the world. One neighbor muttered, "Never thought I'd see him carry anyone but himself." Another shook her head softly. "That's not just carrying, that's repaying." Nicholas led his father toward the waiting car. The chauffeur stepped forward, but Nicholas waved him back. He opened the door himself, eased Isaiah inside, then crouched so their eyes met level. "You'll live with me now," Nicholas said, voice steady as a vow. "No more scraping, no more loneliness. You'll eat at my table, in my home, and every person I meet will know the name Isaiah Bennett, because you are the reason I breathe." Isaiah's lips trembled. He nodded, eyes shining not with pride, not even with relief, but with quiet peace, like a burden had finally lifted after a lifetime of waiting. That night, the mansion glowed on the hill like a beacon. For the first time, Isaiah sat at a grand dining table, not as a beggar, not as an afterthought, but as family. His son sat beside him. The staff moved with respect, not pity. The cutlery gleamed, the plates overflowed. Yet still, Isaiah bowed his head, whispering grace in the same humble tone he always had. Nicholas didn't eat at first. He only watched his father take a bite of real food, watched the smile spread across his face without effort, and felt the iron grip of guilt finally loosen. Weeks later, at a glittering charity gala, Nicholas stood before cameras, leaders, and investors. But for once, the speech wasn't polished. It was raw. "This man," he said, placing an arm around Isaiah, "taught me the meaning of wealth. He fed me when he was starving. He clothed me when he was bare. If you see me as a billionaire, remember, I am only the shadow of his sacrifice." The hall fell silent, not from shock, not from spectacle, but from being moved, shaken at the core. Isaiah lifted his chin, dignity restored. The story didn't end with pity. It ended with balance. A father who once begged for scraps now walked halls of marble, not as a guest, not as a burden, but as a man honored by the son he had raised. And Nicholas, stripped of all masks, finally understood. Wealth wasn't money, success wasn't headlines. The greatest inheritance a man could ever receive wasn't houses or contracts. It was love. It was sacrifice. Sometimes it takes watching the person who raised you bow low before strangers to realize how high they should have been lifted all along. Stories like Isaiah's remind us love is worth more than gold. Sacrifice is the richest legacy of all. If this touched your heart, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs hope today, and don't forget to subscribe. because we have more powerful stories coming your way.